in 2018, and it covers a natural stone wall. I don't know if this has been approved, but the idea that this opening is to preserve the sandstone rock face is nonsense. And I just want to understand how it's fair and reasonable that on this basis, the setback on the boundary of our house for this excavation is reduced to 500 millimetres to align with the brick wall that was built by the owner of 20 Forest Knoll, clearly with the express purpose to give an opening for a potential car park. I strongly request that this goes back to the council for further review. Also, the preliminary geotechnical report is based on a 2000 report on my property, actually, with boreholes between 0.6 metres to 2.8 metres. The construction or the excavation next year is going to be more than 8 metres. And to quote from this report, if the wall is founded within soils or poor quality sandstone, it may need to be underpinned prior to bulk excavation. Our house and the adjoining house at 89 Francis Street both required extensive underpinning when we did our construction 8 years ago at a cost of many hundreds of thousands of dollars. So this is clearly risky business, and we're deeply concerned about the safety and structural integrity of our home. The second point I'd like to bring up is compliance once again. I mean, we love our house and we've spent considerable money erecting double-storey steel windows on the eastern and southern sides, which look out to wonderful trees and let in lots of light. Now, I understand that this particular house on 85 Francis Street is going to look like a single dwelling from the street, but I tell you what, it looks like an absolute mass from where we stand. From where we stand in our living room, in our dining room, in our sunken courtyard. So I find it impossible to understand that it can be non-compliant when it comes to the height of the building, the wall height, and the setbacks on Francis Street and our boundary. So I strongly object to this lack of compliance and request that this goes back to the councillors for further review. Thanks for your time.
Thank you, Mr. McDonald. Are there any questions from the members of the panel for Mr. McDonald? All right, well, we'll move on. Thank you. Is Mr. Tim Reed present? Mr. Tim Reed?
Hello, yes, I'm here.
Ah, good, you were muted. And Mr. Reed, you're from 19 Forest Knoll Avenue.
Yes, I am, Chair.
Yes, please go ahead.
Thank you very much, panel. In order to get through what I have to say in the time, I'm going to read out what I've written.
All right.
Following a reading of the report to the WLPP, and on behalf of residents, I sent an email to council this morning dealing with new information concerning the excavation required into the sandstone cliff face for the extensive underground parking being requested and the brick wall which is mentioned in that context, which we believe to be illegal work. I ask that this email be given to the WLPP members and taken into consideration before any decisions are made. It contains interesting information, and I think it really needs to be part of this consideration. Further, we request a site inspection to clarify the points made in my email further. The WLPP is dealing with a beautiful sandstone cliff face and the grass nature strip, which is an integral part of the reserve at the end of the street and which is highly valued by the residents and other members of the community. We do not believe that the officer's report to the WLPP gives sufficient weight to the value of the natural beauty of this area in densely populated Bondi Beach. It is a scarce commodity, and the council has a reputation for trying to protect the natural beauty of the whole municipality. Approving this application in its present form would be a retrograde step and undermine the council's overall work and policy. The second point, given the danger and high risk factors to the adjoining buildings inherent in the massive excavation which is required, the geotechnical report should be written independently or at arm's length from the applicant, or at the very least be subject to third-party assessment and second opinions. It should also be made available to residents who must be given time to respond in detail if they wish to any conclusions in the report. There is simply too much potentially at risk here for any other course of action. In fact, the best course of action for the WLPP, in my view, would be to make full approval of this application dependent on that report and following public consultation over it. Finally, although it is not a condition of approval of the DA, and in the event of approval being granted, the residents want the consequential disruption to their lives caused by this massive development, massive in the context of this street, acknowledged by the applicant, and the following protocols agreed. A fully detailed schedule of works over the whole period of time be written in conjunction with a traffic management plan and signed off by the applicant, and copies given to every affected resident. The development occurs on the corner of a very narrow street with difficult access to the development site. So the demolition of a house, the excavation of hundreds of tons of rock and soil, and then the building of 2 more houses with all the attendant materials required will take a very long time. The arrival and departure of large vehicles required to carry out this work must be scheduled, residents informed of these movements, and human resources such as traffic control persons allocated. There is probably a lot more to mention. If approved, the council must take responsibility for the welfare of residents in this respect. Thank you very much, panel.
Thank you, Mr. Reid. Thank you. The next speaker I have is Jenny Webb. Is she present? Is Jenny Webb?
Yes, hi, can you hear me?
Yes, I can't see you. I can hear you.
Oh.
I can see you.
I'm here.
Well,
Sorry.
please go ahead. So just for the record, you're from apartment 181 Francis Street, Bondi Beach.
Correct.
Yes, I can see you now. Please go ahead.
So firstly, thank you, panel, for listening to all our concerns. I also share a lot of the concerns that the residents before me have mentioned in terms of the larger impact on the area. But for the moment, I'd just like to consider, everyone to consider the impact that there seems to be a massive amount of, in terms of the reports and things, it seems that they are considering the neighbour to the east to be number 18 Forest Knoll. However, what it doesn't seem to take into account so much is how close number 81 Francis Street is in terms of the visual and acoustic privacy, as well as the overshadowing. Now, initially, all the sun paths and things that were drawn up completely disregarded how it affected number 81 Francis Street, despite the fact that my apartment, which is right on that corner, is very close. I would consider myself to be a direct neighbour to number 20, purely because the Francis Street dwelling that they're planning on building will be a mere few metres away from my apartment. Now, I know that I've seen some updated shadow forecasting that has been drawn up, and I think is now, while it does consider that building, it is vastly different from the original one that was put in terms of the amount of shadow. And I think that's a little bit, I'd like someone to look into that a little bit more, because if you go by their original overshadowing plan, my apartment will be completely in shadow. At the moment, my apartment only gets afternoon sunlight. So they keep talking about how it will be post 3 o'clock, any impact, this sort of thing. That's the only time my apartment gets sunlight at the moment, and it will be taking all of that light. So I will now have no light in my apartment whatsoever, which, given the moisture that we're all dealing with at the moment and the amount of rainfall that we've all talked about that comes down the hill, my apartment gets all of that. The mold is going crazy at the moment on all all walls in the apartment. We've had a moisture reading come in. So the fact that I will be denied any kind of solar access is just going to be absolutely detrimental to the value of my asset, the health and well-being, mental and physical, of the occupants, which is a family. There is a family in there at the moment with 2 children. And to cast them entirely in darkness because they are not within the compliance of the height restrictions. They're going to maximise every area of the space available at the cost of the other neighbours, of the people around, will be significantly impacted because they want to maximise their investment. And I think, given that we are very real people, we love the area, we don't want to have this overdevelopment negatively affect all of us, our happiness, our well-being, as well as our investment in our properties. So I just feel that needs to be considered because, quite frankly, they could put a smaller property on there, come in with the compliance of the envelope that everyone has talked about, and have less impact on the neighbours. And I just don't see why they're maximising their investment and profits should come before our enjoyment and our well-being, our health and safety. Thanks. Thanks for your time.
Thank you, Ms. Webb. Can I, just so I can understand one thing?
Yeah.
Is this apartment at the moment leased? Is that right?
Yes, it is. But
and you're living at Chatswood somewhere?
Yes, but I do plan on moving back in the future.
Okay. Okay. Thank you very much. Are there any questions of Ms. Webb from the members of the panel?
No questions.
Okay. We'll move on then to Mr. George Caravanis. I did notice his flag earlier.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
And I do apologise. We've had some technical problems and I'm zooming from my mobile phone. So if there's an issue with that, I do apologise.
Okay, well, we can hear you. I can't see you, but just for the record, Mr. Caravanis, you're the town planner on behalf of the applicant.
Yes, I am.
Yes, please go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, panel members, and thank you for the opportunity to address you today. I have with me the architect, Mr. Michael Turker, who's available to answer any questions should the panel require those at the conclusion of my presentation. First, I'd like to confirm that we concur with the thorough assessment contained in the council officer's report, and of course with the recommendation for approval, and we do not wish to challenge any of the recommended conditions of consent. As you may be aware, the site has been recently subdivided. It's received subdivision approval for 2 allotments on the site. This DA is for the erection of a dwelling house on each of those newly created allotments. Council officer's report does state that the proposal or the proposed dwellings exceed the 0.5 to 1 FSR standard, which is based on the parent lot, which is technically correct. However, the council officer's report also confirms that the dwellings would comply with the FSR of the reduced area of the newly created lots. In other words, once the approved subdivision is registered, it's already approved, but once it's registered, each dwelling will comply with the higher FSR of 0.77 to 1, which is a function of the smaller allotment size. In terms of height, the Forest Knoll dwelling complies with the standard, and the Francis Street dwelling mostly complies, with the exception of a portion of the building towards the rear, which exceeds the standard by 270 millimetres, which is a negligible non-compliance of 3%. Indeed, the proposal largely complies with the majority of the controls, which further validates the siting and bulk and scale of the dwellings. The minor non-compliances with 1 setback and some wall height do not give rise to any material impacts. Indeed, in terms of these impacts, privacy has been addressed by the location of windows and screening. Solar access is a result of a largely compliant envelope, and as I said, the minor non-compliances do not give rise to any significant additional shadow as confirmed in the council officer's report. And before I conclude, in terms of the excavation of the new driveway, this has been addressed at length on page 75 of the council assessment report. You will see that the new opening is located where the rock has already been covered up by brickwork. The excavation will be undertaken in accordance with the submitted geotechnical report and of course with council's conditions of consent. As you may be aware, the site is not a heritage item, nor is it in a conservation area. And in our view, the proposed opening and excavation is acceptable, and the only place you can have access to the site, because from Francis Street, it's not practical to come in for access for both dwellings. Members of the panel, it's for these reasons that the proposal, in our opinion, is appropriate for the site and is worthy of approval.
Thank you, Mr. Caravan. Is there any questions from the members of the panel for Mr. Caravan?
Yes, please, Mr. Chair. Sandra Robinson.
Go ahead.
You briefly commented on the access location, and that's where you've got a setback non-compliance for the excavation. Is there any flexibility to provide a greater setback for that excavation?
I'm not entirely sure. I think we're confined with the zone of a tree, which is we're just outside its zone of influence. But if I can defer to my architect, maybe he can answer that question.
We'll ask Mr. Turco in a moment.
And I'll ask another question that maybe the architect, I'll just get it out. The comment, the concern that Ms. Webb raised about overshadowing, could you just explain to us the shadow impact overall, not just the shadow impact from the contravention?
I probably need to defer to my architect because I don't have the shadow diagrams in front of me, and I had them all printed. I don't have them in front of me, I'm afraid. I don't know whether Mr. Turco is there.
We can ask Mr. Turco in a moment. Any other questions for Mr. Caravanas? All right. Thank you, Mr. Caravanas. So is Michael Turco there, please?
My panel members and people of the chair.
Yes, here you.
Hello.
So
Hello, panel members. And
you're the architect for the applicant, Mr. Turco?
yes, we are. We've looked after the application and design of the proposal. The contravention around number 81 Francis Street, the previous proposal didn't show the extent that was of 81 Francis Street. So we have included more in the shadow study that had arisen from comments raised by council planners when assessing and looking at the shadows that were being proposed by or being illustrated by our application at the dwelling to the south being the dwelling that fronts Francis Street. That's the explanation around the contravention.
Sorry, I'm just wanting to understand how much extra shadow there's going to be, not why the information changed, but whether Ms. Webb's concern was
yes,
valid.
sure. Apologies for that. Well, look, we're talking about impact to number 81 Francis Street at 3 p.m. on winter being the day that greatest impact will be occurring to most adjacencies and immediate neighbours. So we're seeing there is an impact on the corner of number 81 Francis Street in that southern corner, but we do remind everyone that that is occurring at 3 p.m. in the winter, on the winter solstice, when the sun is lowest in the sky. We're thinking anything beyond that will will have no impact outside of that month or that particular day. The form itself in that.
Sorry.
Sorry. Yeah, the form itself in that location as well, it sits as a single level volume. It's within 900 mil of the boundary along there, and it's sitting within the existing height limit. So the proposal in that southeast corner under question that is creating the shadow does sit within the allowable envelopes under the LEP.
My other question about the driveway location and the 500 mil excavation setback, is there any potential to look at alternative locations?
Sure. Look, the 500 mil location is sort of developed and has come about from a couple of things, being the tree, the Norfolk pine that we're trying to retain within that front part of the site fronting Forest Knoll. There is an intention there to try and retain as much of that street edge as we can, hence the the proposal to reclaim some of the sandstone within the existing building and dressing and doing the best we can to reinstate what would probably be a more appropriate frontage. In doing all of that, we do have a soil zone and have had arborist advice that we are on that zone of influence within the root structure. We do, I think, with further geotechnical advice, we could potentially look at narrowing that width and pulling a portion of that boundary, pulling a portion of the basement off the boundary where we are addressing or we are flanking number 87 Forest Knoll. I think that additional technical advice that's been recommended in the conditions would certainly help go a long way to being able to explore opportunities there. And if that's something that, and raised by other people at today's meeting, if there is that opportunity that we can explore that, there's certainly opportunity there.
Thank you.
Just one final thing, if I may. On your first question, sorry, on your second question, there is also an increased degree of separation between our property and number 81 by virtue of the public walkway that sits between the two buildings.
Isn't that on the other side?
That's
81
correct.
is, sorry, are we dealing with that? Is 81 on the eastern side or the western side?
No, it's on the southeast, George. We're talking about 87.
Are we talking about 87 or 81?
87.
I'm sorry, I was dealing with 81. I do
Okay.
apologise.
Any further questions of Mr. Turco in the panel? Okay, thank you, Mr. Turco.
Thank you, Pat.
Mr. Caravanis, does Mr. Gadd, the owner applicant, want to speak?
I don't think he needs to add anything, but if
Okay.
yeah, that's fine. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. Well, look, thank you to all the speakers. It's been very helpful to hear from you all. At the conclusion of the public meeting, we will adjourn and consider this agenda item as well as all the other items on the agenda and notify our decision on the council website as soon as may be possible. Thank you again.
Mr. Chair, could I just ask for one thing? That
no, look,
every effort be made to get that email I wrote.
We've got a number of late submissions and they'll all be taken into account. Thank you. We'll move on then to the next item on the agenda, which is 5 Kenneth Street, Panorama. And the first speaker I have is Rachel Gavin. Is that person present?
Yes, here I am. Thank you.
Hello. And just for the record, you're from apartment 410 Kenneth Street.
That's correct.
Yes, please go ahead.
So I'm Rachel Gavin. Thanks everybody for the opportunity to talk. I have lived at Unit 4, number 10 Kenneth Street for over 10 years. I purchased the property and fell in love with the property because it offers a beautiful view of the ocean, Waverley and Clovelly cliff line and the headland. So it is quite a unique and stunning outlook. This headland view also changes day to day, and it's something that I personally immensely enjoy. These views can be observed from my lounge, my dining, my kitchen and bedroom area. The development proposed at 5 Kenneth Street significantly and severely reduces my views. It takes the views I enjoy whilst giving them panoramic, uninhibited views with ceiling heights of 3.6 metres. I'm not asking for the development to be stopped, but rather I'm asking for a fairer outcome for this development. I would ideally be asking and would like them to scale back their ceiling heights so I can keep and enjoy my views, and they also benefit from it as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Gavin. Now, I should note that Mr. Tony Moody, who couldn't be present to speak, has sent in a written submission in relation to his client at apartment 110 Kenneth Street.
Yep.
Relating to views, and we will take that into account.
Yep. That is my place. He's just called it level 1, but I'm the main
so
person.
That is what you can talk about at number 4.
Yes.
4. Okay.
Thank you.
Very much. Mr. David Mitchell, is he present?
I am, Chair.
Now your name is David Mitchell and you're the architect for the applicant.
That's right, yes.
Yes, please go ahead with your.
Okay, thank you, Chair. Thank you, panel. If I could just talk to the objectors' concerns. Just firstly, that suggestion around a 3.6 metre floor to ceiling height. We don't have that. We have a 3.2 metre floor to floor height on the lower ground level. We have a 3050 mil floor to floor on the Unit 2 ground floor level. And then we have a 2.8 metre floor to ceiling in Unit 2 on the additional proposed level. So as you can see, we are at, it's an existing building, so it is an alterations and additions, and these heights are consistent with residential building controls and not excessive. So if I could just sort of talk to the starting point for a project like this is the amenity of our clients and tenants balanced against the amenity of the neighbours and the public realm. Fortunately, we've been provided with extensive view loss analysis as a result of the previous approval on the site, which was a 4-storey, 4-unit development. It was a new build construction. As a practice, we try and be as sustainably focused as we can be, and we felt that an alteration and addition to the existing building was the most appropriate way of achieving our clients' objectives and also our own sort of office ethos. We used the previous approval footprint as a guide to ensure that our neighbours at 3 Kenneth Street retained the appropriate view sharing corridors, which were set out in that approval. And so, yeah, we have achieved that, which is sort of been borne out in the assessment report. This left the proposed additional level as the key design element to ensure respectful view sharing from all of our neighbours across the road to the north. We settled quite early on to the design of that, the form of that level. We settled on a splayed roof form as we had sort of, this extensive view loss assessments, and we could sort of understand quite early on the importance of these view corridors that needed to be maintained. And so we felt that a form such as the one proposed enabled as many apartments on all the way, either way down the street to minimise any impacts from this additional level. During the DA process, we undertook extensive view loss analysis, I think from about 14 of the units. And so it was actually quite helpful to do that because it did sort of bear out the fact that pitched roof design was appropriate, not from just across the road, but from sort of all the way up and down the street. So then the last consideration for us then was that we ensured we had a strong architectural design, in terms of the streetscape, that regardless of the constraints of the building, that the building was a strong architectural element and not something that was sort of just apologising for itself. We felt that the splayed additional roof form achieved this intent as we have this element that carries through the rest of the building. On all levels and on the front and rear of the building, we have splayed concrete planters to soften the building and provide lovely amenity to the tenants, but also from the public realm. But that sort of splayed language is then repeated up in that top roof form. So from sort of those elements, we feel that we've achieved a really contemporary addition it's very respectful of the neighbouring buildings and their view sharing opportunities, and also sitting sort of really respectfully in the street. We're very happy with council's assessment of the proposal. We just had one condition that we would request that the panel review. We sent a submission. It just relates to the drying undercroft area below the existing garage for the Unit 2 tenancy.
What condition number is that, please?
Sorry?
Which condition number is that?
That is 2A.
2A.
Yes. So we sent the panel a letter just to explain our reasons why we think it's appropriate, and that the sort of impacts are negligible on our neighbours and also on our own tenants.
Right. Thank you, Mr. Mitchell. Mr. Mitchell, just a couple of questions about what you've been saying about the floor to ceiling heights.
Yes.
Is it correct that the two lower floors, the ground floor and below that, are existing?
So the
existing level.
Yeah. So the ground floor, and level 1 are existing. The existing floor levels.
Yeah.
The lower ground level, so the very bottom level, is a demolition of the existing structure, and it's at a new level which is lower to increase the floor to ceiling space. So that is at the lowest point on the site, which is not viewed from across the street.
Right. And the top level, which is the new level,
yes,
there's the floor to ceiling height is 2.8 metres.
That's correct. Yes.
So that could come down a bit if we were looking for a reduction.
Yes, it could. It could come down, 100 mil to 2.7. That's right.
All right. What about what is the thickness of the roof slab?
The roof, the actual roof construction, or the slab of the level. The slab of the level of that top level.
The thickness of that level that's above.
Yeah. So it's 300 mil.
Right.
So it's quite constrained.
Why is it constrained?
Oh, as in it's already that's not a particularly generous thickness is what I'm sort of more saying, that it would be very difficult to have a roof construction of less than 300 to account for roof falls and thermal comfort.
Right. So
the plans are showing it at 420. Is that incorrect?
So that point, that 420, is in the centre of the roof, which is the point at which you can see it splays. So there's a crest in the middle of the roof. It splays to those two outer points, which then splay down. So it's a 300 mil all the way up to then that top section, which goes from 300 up to 420 in the centre. So to comply with the LEP height control, and also to then comply with the falls, to actually have the water shed off the roof to the sides.
right.
Is there any opportunity to reduce that at all? No.
Not with this design. What we tried to do was to have the highest point at the midpoint of the roof, such that we were minimising the impact on anyone, because obviously it has to fall one way or the other. And through our shadow studies and our modelling, we determined that this roof form had the most minimal impact, because we're limiting the fall of the roof to that sort of central portion across to that ridge, which then falls down. So I don't know how we could achieve a thinner roof structure than what's been proposed.
Thank you.
Any further questions of Mr. Mitchell from the panel?
No, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Mitchell. And thank you to all the speakers on this matter. So at the conclusion of the public meeting, we'll consider this agenda item and notify our decision on the council website. Thank you. We move then to the next item, which is 28 Lyons Road, Street, Dover Heights. And the first speaker I have is Bradley Meyerowitz. Is that person?
Hi, Chair. Yep, I'm here, Brad.
Hello. And you are from 26 Lyons Street, Dover Heights.
That's correct. That's correct. Can I just double check whether or not the panel received my, I guess, final submission?
Well, all late submissions have been considered. So if yours was a late one, we've got it.
Okay. All right. Thanks very much. And thanks for giving me the opportunity to address the panel today. I'm the owner of 26 Lyons Street, Dover Heights. And my wife and I have 3 young children, and we live next door the proposed development on the western side. I'm fully aware and understand that the neighbouring land is zoned for the development of a 2-storey dwelling. I've read council's report, and I've got a few points which I think need to be discussed. I don't wish for the design to be largely changed, but I do have a few things that will impact us. Starting with the landscape at the front of the property, our primary view of the ocean, our first primary view, is from the front room of our 2nd story. Council's report provides a condition that the trees at the front of the property have a maximum mature tree height that doesn't exceed 4.5 metres. Council's report goes on to say that at the front of the building, there are going to be 3 Heath Banksia species trees, which have mature heights of approximately 4.5 metres and won't obscure views from our adjoining property. I've written to council asking for more information regarding those species. Just to go through it with you briefly, the Australian Plant Society of New South Wales, the Botanic Gardens of South Australia, and the Kew Gardens, which is a UNESCO website, all basically say that the Heath Banksia tree will grow to approximately 25 metres in height. It basically has a mature height of at least 10 metres and about 4 metres wide. So it's a tree that is best used for wider streetscapes, parks and reserves, as opposed to being at the front of somebody's house in particular. I've also contacted a level 5 arborist about it, who's also confirmed the fact that the Heath Banksia definitely has a mature height, which is far greater than 4.5 metres high. From the front of our building, if you have a look, or if anybody still has a copy, image 1, the current view of our ocean from the 2nd story bedroom, if you're putting in trees that will go to 10 metres high, 3 of them out the front of the property, that will directly block 95% of our views of the ocean. If you have a look at image 2, you can actually see a rough illustration of our loss of view, which will be incredibly substantial. So I would like to ask us also to have a look at the back of the property. And at the back of the property, there's a Takaru tree. Now, the Takaru tree, there's a bit of less information available online, but from the information I've found is that it grows to about 15 metres high and has a width of about 8 metres. That's an absolutely enormous sized tree. So at the back of our property, our other main view of the ocean is from the back bedroom and also from our balcony. That tree where it's placed at the moment is directly between the 2 trees that are going to be removed from the site that are currently there at the moment. And again, I've done an illustration just to show you on image number 3 what the size of the Takaru looks like. It's almost one of those type of African safari trees. It's incredibly wide and incredibly high. And where it's sitting, if you have a look at image 4 from the balcony and image 5 from our rear bedroom, you can clearly see that it's going to block our views. So what I'm asking for is at the front and the back of the property, I don't see any reason why there shouldn't be something put in place like shrubs or something more appropriate that won't go more than 3 metres in height something that won't block our view. There's no need or reason behind blocking our view on that side. And there are very few trees on the street alone that go to anywhere near of that height. And there's only one a bit further down that has caused incredible conflict between the two neighbors. So I just ask that those trees either be shrubs or something that will not grow to greater than 3 meters in height. That way we preserve our main views from the front and the back of our building. The second that we've really got is in relation to overshadowing, excessive bulk, and privacy concerns. Just running you through a little bit about the building itself. It has a wall height which faces our property of greater than the control. It exceeds the floor to space ratio by 18%. And that FSR does not include an alfresco area, which is 75 square meters. It also doesn't include a cabana area of roughly 18 square meters. Just to let you know, that alfresco has a building height of around about 3.8 meters, and the cabana has a building height, even with the condition, of 2.4 meters. So just looking at the WLEP, and the reason why I go into this is because councils basically come to the conclusion that because it complies with the building height of the proposal, that it's within the building height, that you can just ignore the fact that it goes higher than the external wall height, the control of the external wall height. So if you have a look at the WLEP, you've got the maximum building height of 7.5 meters for flat roof buildings. Bear in mind that on our side of property, the relevant area that is breaching the control is not flat. It's a pitched roof, and the pitched roof buildings in the WLEP provides that the maximum height at the ridge itself is 8.5 meters and the external wall height of 7 meters. So what council was saying was basically because the ridge height is not higher than 8.5 meters, even though the wall height is significantly greater than 7 meters, it doesn't mean that we're going to be receiving overshadowing. And my point to that really is there's absolutely no reason why that wall height should not be reduced to that 7 meters on our side of the property. It'll cause significant overshadowing on a property that is already excessive in bulk and size, already greater than the FSR, with an absolutely enormous alfresco area and a pool cabana as well. There's no reason why the height of that wall should not be reduced to 7 meters, or alternatively, that the applicant creates a flat roof that is 7.5 meters in height. We just want to be fair. We just want to make sure that the extent of our overshadowing is limited as much as possible. Going through to the next item in my agenda really is the...
You better be quick because you're out of time.
Sure. So no properties in Lion Street have a cabana. Equally, no properties in Lion Street have a structure higher than the fence line that is built on the boundary at all. The WLEP provides that the fences are not to be greater than 1.8 meters high, but the cabana, which will be on the fence, will have a building height of 2.4 meters. Again, I don't see any reason why we should be subjected to that sort of overshadowing of our property from the cabana. Equally, at the same time, this is an enormous cabana area. It's 6 meters long and 3 meters wide. That is going to look and have an excessive bulk overlooking our property. From our balcony, from the back of our house, it'll just look incredibly out of place. Taking you to the alfresco area, I've just got 2 more points, please, if you could just let me finish. I'll summarize as quick as I can. The alfresco area itself is 75 square meters in long with a building height of 3.8 meters high. Taking into account again that they're already going over the FSR and the sheer bulk size of this alfresco area, you can have a look at the rest of the properties in both Lion Street and the street behind it, in Liverpool Street. Nobody has an alfresco area greater than 25 square meters. That in itself, with a 3.8 meter building height, is going to cause significant shadowing to our property, and it's not classified in the FSR. I ask that the alfresco have its roof lowered, be reduced in size, and set back from our boundary. And if I could just ask as well, the pool cabana, that's sitting on our fence as well, on our boundary. I don't see any reason why, and I understand it's a bit of a loophole in terms of the WLEP, but why can't the cabana be 900 millimeters away from the fence? It's going to significantly reduce the privacy impacts that we're going to have from that cabana as well. And I don't see any reason why it should be placed on the boundary at all. The last thing that I've got to say is just on the excessive light spill. There's an incredibly large window to the stairs. It's 1.5 meters wide and 6.5 meters high. It's an absolutely unnecessary feature which directly faces our property. Now, our council says it's approximately 3.5 meters away from our window. The fact of the matter is something like that that's facing stairs with a lot of light attached to it is going to cause excessive light spill to us. At the end of the day, I asked for that to be halved inside. And again, our town planner who wrote in our initial report provided the exact same views, that we will receive excessive light spill. And sorry, while I'm going, the very last point that I'd like to make is just to the underground theatre. I understand, and I don't have anything wrong with the excavations that take place. But please just understand an underground theatre and what it's there for. It's there to listen to movies, to watch things for other people not to hear. There's no mention at all in the report or in any of the diagrams that suggest that that area, that theatre underground, would be soundproof. In fact, council provided that they had to have windows. My greatest fear is that theatre area underground with windows open late at night, early in the morning, whatever it might be, listening to a movie, whatever it is, with those windows open, directly being across from our baby's bedroom is going to cause significant sound issues for us. It's something which I ask, is it possible, number one, to ask council to remove those windows? Bear in mind that the applicant in his initial plans didn't include windows to the underground area in relation to the theatre and was only put in there because council told them it may be a habitable area. So please, can I ask that we either remove those windows and double make sure that there's no sound issues in relation to that underground theatre? And that's the end of my submissions. Thanks very much.
Well, you went well over time, but thank you for your submission, Mr. Meyerowitz. Now, next speaker is Mr. Justin Jacobson. Mr. Jacobson there, please. Mr. Justin Jacobson from 24 Lions. I'll come back and check again. Carol Schlesinger, is she present?
Yes. Hello.
Hello.
Hi.
You're from 94 Liverpool Street, Dover Heights.
Yes, correct. Thank you, Chair. I'm from 94 Liverpool Street, so I'm just south of the 28 Lion Street, and our house, the back of our house faces directly into the back of 28 Lion Street. I've only got two points. One is that I did send a letter into council, objection of which I received no reply whatsoever, or acknowledgement or notice of this meeting.
Well, it was received because it's in my list of submissions received.
Right, thank you. I don't know what the normal council protocol is, but I was quite surprised when Brad knocked on my door on the weekend saying this meeting was on. So I don't know if council normally inform people who've put submissions in, but I had no idea of this. So that could be noted. So I have no idea really what has been taken into consideration or not from what my my objection was, which mainly is as I face directly, the master bedroom will be facing directly into my master bedroom. So I just wanted to ensure that there was some privacy screening. And also because of that, I actually did request in my submission that the plants in the back were higher than 4 meters. Sorry, Brad, but that's that was to ensure some privacy from the two houses, because we look directly onto that house and they look directly into our house.
Right. Thank you for that. I've noted that. Are there any questions of Ms. Schlesinger from the panel? Thank you, Ms. Schlesinger. The next speaker I have is...
What happens if I put you on speaker? I can put you on speaker and you can just talk. Can you do that?
Who is that?
Okay, hold on. Yeah.
But who is that speaking? The next speaker I have is Jeremy Roos, architect.
Mr. Chair, it's George Caravanis. Is it okay if I go before him?
You go first, Mr. Caravanis. So
thank you.
You're the town planner on behalf of the applicant.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And again, I apologise for visual or audio. I have with me Mr. Roos, who is available to answer any questions, and he's the architect, of course. And again, I'd like to confirm that we're happy with the report and the recommendation, and we do not wish to challenge any of the conditions. Now, while the proposal does comply with the development standard of height, as you would be aware, under the LEP, it does result in a non-compliance with the FSR, and it's a technical non-compliance. And this is confirmed in the council officer's report, which states that the extent of variation is equivalent to the GFA of the proposed basement. In other words, the proposal comprises a compliant above ground or visible FSR. That if the basement GFA was not included, the proposal would comply with the FSR and not require a clause 4.6. In this regard, as the proposal comprises a compliant above ground FSR and a virtually compliant building envelope, it is consistent with the low density character of the area. As stated in the council officer report, and I quote, the proposal will not result in any unreasonable amenity impacts, such as overshadowing, loss of views, or loss of privacy. For these reasons, members of the panel, that the proposed FSR is considered acceptable and the clause 4.6 variation well-founded. In terms of wall height, the proposal mostly complies with only minor variations that do not give rise to any material amenity impacts or indeed any streetscape impacts. The proposed rear setback has been conditioned to comply. And in terms of solar access, as indicated in the council officer's report, the proposal does comply with the solar access controls. In terms of views, these are principally from bedrooms upstairs. The living area is oriented to the rear and is at the ground floor. There are some water views, of course, but no iconic elements. And as the proposal comprises an above ground compliant envelope, the proposal, in our view, satisfies the relevant tests of tenacity and in any case is not resulting in any substantial view impact. In response to the matters raised by the neighbours, in terms of the trees, and I'm assuming I've got some instructions from my client, which I'll double check, but I would have thought that in terms of the trees at the front, we would be happy with a species at a height of 3 to 4 metres, which I think the neighbour would be happy with. And also in terms of the species at the rear, if we can agree on a species at a height of 4 metres, and that will be a fine medium between the neighbour to the side and the neighbour to the rear. In terms of the...
Suggest any height limit on the species at the rear?
I'm sorry?
Did you suggest any height limit on the species at the rear?
Yeah, I was suggesting 4 metres.
4 metres, okay.
Yeah.
I need to make a note. Yes, go ahead.
And in terms of the glass, the two-storey glass window on the western elevation, in terms of the light spill, again, subject to acceptance of instructions from my client, which I will get those in a minute. I think we could potentially frost that, and that will reduce the any potential glare. And also in terms of the theatre room.
Sorry, which window is that you could frost?
So Mr. Chair, if you go to the western elevation, which is, you'll see a two-storey window, which is from the stair.
Yeah.
I'm talking about that window there, which is, I don't know if it's got a number on it.
Yeah.
Sorry, just to interrupt.
It is actually frosted already.
It is already, yeah, frosted glass.
Yeah. It's already.
Yeah.
All right.
And in terms of the windows of the theatre room, I mean, the theatre room is located in the basement. If you had the theatre room located on the ground floor, it would create a much greater noise source than what it would in the basement. Notwithstanding that, normally when, with these sort of things, in order to provide that ambience, you need to have closed windows anyway. So I don't necessarily see a problem with that. Notwithstanding that, if the panel is minded to not have those windows on that elevation, again, I think we're going to be happy with a condition to that effect. If I can just ask my architect to confirm whether he's happy with those landscaping conditions and potentially the removal of the window from the theatre.
Sure. In regards to the removal of the window, I think we would be happy with that. In regards to the landscaping, we my landscape architect produced a landscape plan for the DA submission. Council then pointed out that we're in a habitable corridor and nominated which species we actually have to put on our landscape plan. So we've just gone on off what council has told us to do, which is why we've updated the landscape plan based on the council conditions. If Brad would like us to drop the height of it, we'd be on board with that. We just basically updated our landscape plan based on what council told us to do.
Thank you, Mr. Roos. Are there any questions from the panel, either for Mr. Caravanis or Mr. Roos?
No questions. I had a question just about the cabana, and it seems to be 100 mil off the boundary. Is that something that it is obviously at 2.4 meters high, significantly higher than a boundary fence? Is that something that can be reduced or changed? Because it is a significant structure in that it's 6 meters, I think 6 meters long and 3 meters along the boundary.
Sorry, are we talking about the cabana or the alfresco?
The cabana.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, the cabana, we've been conditioned to drop it to 2.1 meters high, which we've said we're happy to do. Also as well, on our rear boundary fence, which is our southern neighbor, I believe it's one of the speakers that was today. They have a rear boundary fence that's already there, which is, I would say, from our existing ground floor level is about 2.7 to 3 meters in height. And so our cabana roof will be much lower than what that rear existing boundary fence will be anyway.
Is there an opportunity to provide any landscaping between that and the adjoining neighbour on 26?
Behind the cabana?
Yes.
I mean, I would have to look into that, but I would assume if with the 100 meters off the boundary, we're not going to be able to landscape that 100 meters.
No, that's
so. I mean, in order to create landscaping and then not have the overshadowing of the cabana, I mean, we'd have to pull it off quite a bit. So we'd have to look into that if it's possible or not.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Roos. Thank you, Mr. Caravanis. So at the conclusion of the public meeting, we will adjourn and consider this application and notify our decision on the council website. Thank you to the speakers.
Sorry, can I just ask one very quick question? So just on the cabana side, sorry, Bradley Myrovitz here, just the cabana side of things, one of the things which I possibly spoke a bit quickly was just whether or not we could look at the distance between the fence and the cabana of 900 millimeters to be in line with most of the other.
We'll look at that issue. You make that point and I took a note.
Thank you.
We come then to the next item, which is 1 Lion Street, Dover Heights. The only speaker registered is Nadine Paul.
Good, well done. You got as much good. The woman's quite helpful. They like us. Nice.
Is Nadine Port present, please?
Yes, I am. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Oh, hi.
You're the architect designer on behalf of the applicant.
I am. Thank you, panel, for this meeting. And I also wanted to thank council for a reasonable assessment of our proposal. I can see that there was one objector, and I half expected them to be here today, and that's partly why I'm here, really, to answer any questions that arise out of their concerns. So I'm happy to answer any questions relating to any concerns that you can see. But and I also wanted to ask a couple of questions relating to 2 DA conditions, if I may. But otherwise, we're pretty happy with the outcome, which is recommended for approval with conditions. Okay, well, let's start with that. DA condition 2A, which requires a fixed privacy screen or translucent glazing to the entire area of windows 14 and 15. If you have a look at the east elevation, windows 14 and 15, We've set, these are 2 bathroom windows. We've set them at a sill height of 1.5 and shown obscured glazing. We're hoping to have these windows openable because for ventilation to bathrooms. So I'm just querying why council may impose fixed glazing or additional privacy screening, given that they're going to be obscured glass from a sill height of 1.5 metres. So that was just my first query, because I feel like we've addressed any sort of privacy issues already via our design. The second query I had was about DA condition 13, which relates to excavation. And it relates to excavation within 900 millimetres of the boundary at the lower ground level, where we've proposed to replace 2 existing sheds. One is a garden shed, the other one stores pool equipment and filters and that kind of thing. So we've consolidated these structures into a more integrated structure, which is behind the purpose for this whole proposal, which is to integrate all the various additions and structures and works that have been done over the last 30 years. So we've integrated it into a single shed, which we amended the proposal actually to remove any excavation at 900 millimetres from the boundary. So what you're probably looking at is issue B design, where we underwent some modifications to the original proposal. And the new shed actually doesn't propose any excavation within 900 of the boundary. So I realise this might be a standard condition, number 13.
Anyway,
but it has me a little bit confused, that's all.
It's unnecessary.
That's my feeling. Because we've removed the excavation from the boundary. And maybe there's just a little misinterpretation of my drawing, but we're running a retaining wall at 900 from the boundary all the way along, and that runs through into the shed. That's the current proposal, so yeah. Otherwise, I'm happy to answer any other questions that you may have.
The panel have any questions for Ms. Nadine Paul? Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Conclusion of the public meeting, we will determine this application and notify the decision on the council website.
Okay, thank you.
We can come then to 49 Beaumont Street, Rose Bay, and the speaker I have is Suzanne Fuchs.
Yeah, hi.
Hello.
How are you?
And you're the architect on behalf.
Yes, I'm from P&S Design and Construction. I'm the architect.
Yes.
So I just wanted to have condition 11, if we could have that reviewed. I did send in some additional documentation after I had read the council's recommendation. So the original scope of works was considerably larger and had a value of 132 odd thousand. The works, we submitted amended plans as per council's request. And given that we're no longer increasing, we're not adding any roof area or any hard surfaces, and the value of works is now less than $100,000, the requirement for stormwater reports seems quite onerous. And I spoke to Sandeep Singh, the stormwater engineer, and he said that obviously now that the condition had been written, we couldn't do anything, so I should speak to the panel. And he had also stated that council may remove it at the construction certificate stage, which, as you know, if we use a private certifier, is very, like, we have to do a section 455. So the existing buildings on the site were constructed around 2007. So the system that's in place is contemporary and capable of dealing with the current stormwater runoff. And so it just seems like it will be an expensive exercise for us to go through and have a consultant when in fact we're not making any changes to the system or the roof area.
We understand what you're saying.
Okay.
Okay, are there any questions of Ms. Brooks from the members of the panel?
No, thank you.
Okay,
Well, thank you very much.
thank you for your time.
Thank you. At the conclusion of the public meeting, we will consider this application and notify our decision accordingly.
Thank
That
you.
brings us to the next item, which is 168 and 170 Hastings Parade North, Bondi. And the first speaker I have is Adam Haddo.
Mr. Chair, Adam Haddo is the architect for the application. I'm here representing the applicant as well.
You want to go first, Mr. Cosnetta?
It may be that I'll make a short presentation and Adam's here for questions if there are any of the panel.
Okay. So just for the record, Lee Cosnetta, town planner on behalf of the applicant.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and panel members. Thank you to the council officers for a comprehensive report on what is a fairly unique proposal. The plans before the panel today are a result of amendments and compromises that meet directives from council officers. And just as important in this case, they reflect agreed outcomes that were negotiated with the neighbouring property over a long period of time that started well before we lodged the application. The panel should have received a late submission from the adjoining neighbour emailed on Friday, expressing their ongoing support of the application and commending the applicant group on resolving all the matters that they raised with us. That neighbour does, however, raise one issue with conditions of consent, the one that seeks to reduce the parking spaces from 3 to 2. They describe the condition as unnecessary and not in the best interests of the community. And we agree with this comment. We accept the recommendation in all conditions of consent with the exception of that condition, condition 2A. In our view, it's entirely appropriate in this locality to allow a modest discretion from the maximum parking control. The parking situation in this street is horrendous. It's one of the first streets back from the beach and near popular shops. It's a narrow street, it's permanently parked out, it has no parking restrictions. The only options for residents to park in this street is if they have capacity within their site. To deal with this, most dwellings have large basements, like the much smaller semi-detached dwelling immediately next door to us, which has approval for 3 parking spaces via Land Environment Court proceedings. Others have double garaging that's set back 6 metres from the front fence, so they only have 2 garage spots. But of course, they have 2 hard stand spots in front of their garage, not officially counting to their 4 actual parking spaces. Our proposal prioritises landscaping in the front setback zone of the parking with a narrow single driveway to the basement. And doing this means that the basement area is the only place we can seek additional parking. The DCP maximum rate is not a prescriptive control. It actually provides a detailed list of factors for the council to consider that would justify varying the control, and we meet all of these listed factors. As it stands, the proposal reduces the overall parking capacity on the site from 8 cars to 3. It also introduces additional curbside parking on the street through the closure of an existing driveway. We're only seeking 1 additional space for this large family home. It's been designed to have multi-generational living opportunities, and it's highly unlikely that a family that lives there will only have 2 cars. That being the case, the reality is the 3rd car will either be parked in a basement if the panel allows it, or on the street. The 3rd space could also offer the opportunity for service staff, including landscape gardeners, cleaners and the like, to park within the basement rather than on the street. So today we're asking the panel to approve the application as recommended, subject to the deletion of condition 2A. Adam and I are here if you have any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Cosnetta. Are there any questions from members of the panel to Mr. Cosnetta or the architect, Mr. Haddo? Thank you to both of you. It's an extraordinary development and pretty amazing that this would happen not long after that new home was established at 170, but it's up to the applicant to decide what he wants to do. So I'll make no further comment. So thank you to the speakers, and we also had a written submission on behalf of 166 Hastings Parade from Mr. Boskowitz, which will be taken into account. So at the conclusion of the public meeting, we'll determine this application and notify our decision on the council website.
Thank you.
Thank you. To 68 Challier Street, Rose Bay. And the first speakers we have are Diana and Fada Castengren.
Yes, thank you.
Yes.
Okay.
You're from number 70, Charlie.
Correct. The adjoining semi 268.
Okay.
Diana's working, so it's just me here.
Please go ahead.
Thank you. I'd like to thank the council and the panel for the invitation to this session and for the opportunity to state our case further. We were pleased to read that the council's recommendation is to refuse the application. We have lived in this house for nearly 32 years now, making multiple changes ourselves, but always trying to be considerate of our neighbors as one should when living in a semi in a densely populated habitat. We have also wanted to extend our house in the northern end, but we realized that any extension would disadvantage our neighbors, so we therefore didn't go ahead with any of our plans. Please note that our decks, pool, and the living bedroom onto the balcony were all in place when number 68 was purchased by the current owners. We haven't changed anything externally. Anyway, as outlined already in our submission, we were not happy that our lack of objection to the previous submission was used by number 68's consultant as a reason for an acceptance of new submission. The only reason we did not submit an objection at the time is that we were pressured by number 68 not to do so. When we last year found out about the staircase, we suggested that this should be located away from our property boundary. We then told that the kitchen plumbing had already been done, so this couldn't be accommodated. We were not pleased with that. Okay, some minor alterations were made to the staircase, I think, to reduce this impact for us, but the staircase will still impact us considerably. Anyway, after considering the proposal further, we decided to object this time to the staircase. Our main concern is around privacy, as the staircase would have an adverse privacy impact on the northern outlook for us. With the removal of vegetation between our property last year, the proposed extension would enhance the loss of privacy, allowing an unobstructed view of all levels of our property. The distance between the eastern side of the staircase, when it goes to the right, and our common lattice wall would only be some 40 centimeters. In any case, we suggest that the proposed privacy wall will not offer adequate privacy. And should a larger privacy screen be considered, that will result in even more adverse visual impact for us, which is our major concern. Number 68 is already extended 2.50 meters past our western property wall, so a further extension with the addition of a staircase and privacy wall would result in an obstructive impact for us. We're also concerned about the noise of pedestrian traffic up and down the metal staircase. Another point, my final point I'd like to raise, is that DA drawings appear to be incorrectly measured for our property, as our second terrace extends further than the drawings show by approximately 1 meter. The DA drawings may make a false impression of the impact the proposed staircase would have on the outlook and privacy of our property. Due to these reasons, we object to the proposed staircase, but we do empathize with number 68 in the plans for the driveway, as parking in our street is less than ideal. Thank you very much for taking our concerns into account. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Castengren. Is Mr. Michael Newstein present, please?
Yes, Chairman, I am.
I can hear you, but I can't. There you are. There you are. And
The trouble with not seeing me, Chairman.
you're the planner on behalf of the applicant.
I am.
Yes, please go ahead.
Right. Well, just to start off with, we have taken into account, I hoped, Mr. Castengren's concerns, and by putting a privacy screen up on the stairway. And we'll come back to that in a moment, but I also thank him for the support of the problem of the driveway and its installation. The reason there is, in responding to the reasons, this is the only application in this whole run recommended for refusal, is the council, I did use the word carefully, obsession with the symmetry of the pair of semi-detached dwellings. They've both had upper story additions. They don't match. The symmetry is is possibly shaky as an idea, but more particularly, these are not heritage items, not heritage conservation area. And there are many non-symmetrical developments within literally a stone's throw of this particular pair of semis. So the council fixation on that is something that is a great puzzle to me, and I almost don't know quite how to object to it, except that we had made a 10-page submission in the 8.2 review application, and frankly, none of that is engaged in the council officer report. The council officer, the reasons for refusal, firstly, the lack of symmetry, the fact that we will destroy symmetry. It's not something this does. It's already happened. There's an objection to the demolition of the front wall to accommodate a car spot. And there are many houses, across the road and even within the same side of Challier Street that have already have such driveways installed. And some of them, a number of them, have had their front changed to accommodate that, because some of the houses were much too close to the street. And the reason for refusal is the impact on the street tree. An arborist report commissioned by the applicant makes quite clear that the street tree will be not greatly affected, or if not affected at all, and no pruning is required. The external stair at the rear is the subject of Mr. Casagreen's comments, and we have done our best to try and provide privacy. Initially, the greater objection was from the west, not from the east, where Mr. Casagreen is, and that is covered by trees. Mr. Casagreen's terrace is on the other side, and we installed, as a result of his commentary, we installed another privacy screen. And lastly, public interest is cited as usual. And I would suggest that the design of this project is so careful that it could be a model for how to do this rather than a reason for refusal. The key DCP requirements are in 1.10.2D of the DCP, and there are a number of things that need to be considered. Very quickly they are: there is no rear access available, that's the case. The site is of sufficient width so that the space won't take up more than 45% of the width of the frontage, that is the case here, tick. It is no greater than a single car space, tick. The distance between the building and the front property boundary is a minimum of 5.4 metres after the change, tick. Public views would not be adversely affected. It can be seen, but it's partly fenced, unlike many of the other driveways immediately to the east of it upslope. And public views generally will not be affected. I would suggest that when it was done, no one would know the difference. There is another next point in that DCP provision. There is a predominance of this form of streetcar parking in immediate vicinity of the site. Our submission of the 8.2 made quite clear how many there were. There are many. 7, it is designed so it does not detract from the heritage significance of the building or the area. Well, as I said, it's not an item of heritage, and it's not in a heritage conservation area, but the careful design is such that it may as well have been for the care that was taken to replicate the features of the existing house in the change. 8, there's a limited availability for public transport. There's a need for a car in this family. 9, the safety of vehicles and cyclists is maintained. That is done by including a fence and a gate so that the car is separated from the street and doesn't overhang the street. And there's something about the provision of waste receptacles on the site. We're not using the car parking strips to park there. The car parking needs to comply with 1.10.3b, and that is that to successfully integrate into the design of the building. We suggest that that has been done as a model development. This could well be a model on other ones. And 1.10.3c, that there's no element of the street facade has been removed. Well, we are making a change, and we suggest that it is appropriate. But 1.10.3 is too often read without the provision of the last phrase in it, which says, not to be demolished or removed in order to accommodate car parking spaces, quote, unless mitigating measures are taken to ensure cohesive integration of the works with the building. And that is why, that's why I say, I think this is a model result it could be emulated elsewhere and should be emulated for those who have these sorts of houses. So what are the reasons that could be there for approval? The design outcome is a good model, one. Two, the owner of the gets one car off the street, but more importantly, this is, sorry?
Getting very repetitive. You've told us it's a model about 6 times. I'm prepared to accept what you say.
Okay.
So I'd ask you to finish up, please.
Yes, I've got 2 small points to note. This is the narrower part of Challier Street. Challier Street narrows about 6 houses to the west, downslope of this house. And to get cars be able to pass one another, need to be able to pull into spaces that don't have cars parked in them. Putting a driveway there would create another space into which a car may duck to allow one to come down the street. And there are 2 court cases in recent times of similar developments where appeals have been upheld by the LEC. The council knows these are Seagart and Waverley and Nixon and Waverley. No mention of that in the council officer report. We did draw attention to what was said. And lastly, when the council writes that they haven't in 20 years approved such development, that's not correct, because such a development, similar change to front of house, was approved in the last 6 weeks in Roberts Street. We know of this because the applicant was a friend. So that this is not an unusual development. It's not an unusual application, and I commend it to the panel.
Thank you, Mr. Newstead. Well, at the conclusion of the public meeting, we'll consider this review application and notify our decision on the council website. Thank you to the speakers. We move on then to item number 9, which is 105 Hewlett Street. And first speaker is Tony McKechnie. Tony McKechnie?
Hello.
Hello. And you're from 107 Hewlett Street.
Yes, I am.
Yes, please go ahead.
Okay, thank you for the opportunity to address the panel. I just had a couple of issues with the property and the development. I note that Mr. Williams is seeking the approval and in his approval addressed the issues involving 103 Hewlett Street. However, there's some significant issues affecting us that weren't really addressed, such as the building height overall. The elevation of that from the bottom has raised the level of his swimming pool to a point that now it's highly visible from our bedroom, and from the end of the pool you can look back directly into our bedroom and onto our terrace. But on the original DA, we didn't actually object to it because it was meant to sit below that fence, which we were prepared to accept that was okay. But because the overall height has been raised, it now impacts us significantly. The second point is the building is not set back as far as it should be from the boundary. So at one point, it's as close as 650 from our boundary wall, which I believe could be a fire issue. And it was already approved below the minimum, which I think is 900 at 850, but now it's come in significantly in some areas along our boundary. On the basis of these issues, I think it should be considered from our point of view, as well as the impact on 103. It should be considered how it impacts our property as well. So I object to the approval being sought unless the impact of our property is also considered. I just note that the retrospective approval hasn't actually addressed any of the issues for our property, and I would like that to be considered.
That's a separate application, and we're not looking at that today.
But my concern is that if that's left to the certification stage, it will be too late for these issues to be addressed.
No, it has to come before the council, as I understand it.
Okay.
But
right.
It's not before us today, so.
So we've had no correspondence. We've had issues with building works that have been carried out through this this time, which had caused some damage through to our property and some leaking into the property, and we've had no response from the compliance department. From our understanding of the plans, it should be garden area and green space, and it was paved and directly attached to our wall, which led to flooding.
I understand what you're saying.
No one responds to us.
I understand what you're saying, but I want to just emphasise that the unauthorised works are not before us today.
Yeah.
We're only concerned with the modification application that's before us.
Okay. So our concern is that if that goes ahead, then it's going to be too late to address any of our issues.
I understand what you're saying.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. McKechnie. Now, Mr. Caravanis again.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have with me Mr. Tom Williams, who's sitting with me, who's the owner of the site, and is also available to answer any questions of the panel. Now, again, we concur with the assessment report, which does recommend approval, and of course, we don't wish to challenge any of the conditions. The modification, as you would be aware, seeks to alter the gradient entering the site, which consequently results in an increase in the building height by 273 millimetres, and also the removal of 2 external columns on the second floor. So in terms of the height non-compliance, firstly, we believe it's considered to be minor, and as confirmed by the council officer's report, it is lower than the existing, the pre-existing building height, the ridge of that building. It does not result in any additional impacts on the neighbours, does not have a discernible impact from the street, and will remain consistent with the desired future character of the area. In terms of views, the removal of the external columns will actually improve the side views from the property on the other side. The additional height will not result in any additional view loss when compared to the approval. And as indicated, the proposal does remain lower than the pre-existing building on site. I also confirm that this application is only for the modification, which is and does not deal with the unauthorised works which are part of the VIC. So in that regard, it's my opinion, and it's the opinion of the council officers, that the proposal is appropriate from a planning point of view and worthy of approval. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Caravanis. Any questions of Mr. Caravanis from the panel?
No questions.
Now, does the panel wish to hear from or ask any questions of Mr. Williams, who is the owner, but also the architect?
Look, it's probably not really, I'm concerned that Ms. McKechnie felt she didn't get a lot of information. I'm wondering if Mr. Williams is able to provide any response to the concerns that she raised. I know that it's not related to the application, but it's a good opportunity, I think, for him to hear from his neighbour and perhaps respond.
I absolutely agree, and I totally support some of the concerns she has had. In terms of the offset of the building, which in an area we're within about 100 mil of what was originally approved, the offset of the building. We confirm with our certifier it doesn't have any issues as far as fire code, due to there's no openings in those particular points. But there is a mistake, and that is through BIC that we're looking to address that. In terms of the lower garden level, we've had some recent flooding. As we're aware, in Sydney, there's been some incredibly high amounts of rain. And a couple of weeks ago, there was a particularly large amount of rain that fell around the property. It has raised some flooding issues between the properties. We believe this is extensively due to the fact that the stormwater solution has not yet been installed. There is a 2-pump solution that will basically take our stormwater from the lower part of our property back up to Hewlett Street. All of that was stopped when we had the stop work order, so none of the pump system has been installed. In terms of what is going on in terms of the floor treatments to lower ground areas, I'm more than happy to change that if that is willing if that is something that a neighbour wishes us to do. I have no issue at all with doing that. The reason why we've had to terrace is because we had a geotech report on the rock surface. There's a number of sort of large rock stratification that runs through our property, of which there's some clay underneath that rock, and there was some degradation of that clay during the basically whenever there's large rains. So we've had to terrace to support that under area and protect that degradation. But we can absolutely reduce that amount. But the flooding, we do believe, is due to the lack of the pump system actually being working. But we can more than happy to change it to a more of an appropriate garden level to meet the neighbours' concerns. The other issue is on the pool she brought up. And again, the pool has been raised, which is part of the BIC application, which we will be proceeding with after this. But we're more than happy to add screening or whatever they deem is necessary to hide any potential issue there might be in terms of privacy issues. I'm more than happy to add that to the scope of our works.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Williams. So at the conclusion of the public meeting, we will adjourn and determine this matter, and the decision that we make will be published on the council website. We move then to item number 10, 152 Blair Street, North Bondi, and there are no speakers. I'll pass over that to item number 11, which is 61 Rayner Street, North Bondi. And I think the architect, Ricky Block, and the applicant owner, Mr. Durante, are present. Mr. Block, wish to speak? Or Mr. Durante?
Ricky, I think you're on mute. I think Ricky will
Hear me?
address. Yeah, now we're good, Ricky. Thanks.
So who is that, Ricky Block?
Ricky, you're on mute, but it will be Ricky, Chair.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can now. Thank you.
So I just wanted to make a few points and then we're happy to answer any panel questions.
Okay.
So there hasn't, we just wanted to point out that there haven't been any objections to the DA.
No.
The applicant is happy with the report recommending approval. They're also, they don't raise any issues with the conditions of consent either that have been put forward in the report. And that's all come out of a productive consultation with council. So we've had some amendments prior to this meeting that we've put forward and they're noted in the report. And I think that's pretty much it.
Okay. Thank you, Ricky. Are there any questions that the panel wish to ask the architect? No? Well, thank you for making yourself available for questions.
That's okay.
And so at the conclusion of the public meeting, which will be in a few moments' time, we will adjourn and consider this application and notify our decision on the council website as soon as may be possible. Thank you for coming along and making yourself available.
Thanks very much for your time.
And thank you to all of the speakers. I'm going to close the public meeting at 11 minutes to 2. As I said, with thanks to all the contributions made by the speakers. So we can leave the meeting now, but before we do, I just wish to speak to the members of the panel. So the members of the panel, please stay, but members of the public can leave the meeting. Now we're running behind time. It's 1:48. We normally start the private meeting at 1 p.m, but that's obviously not possible. How long do you think we should take a break for some refreshments? If we came back at 2:10, how does that sound to everybody?
Fine.
Fine with me.
Fine with me.
Okay. Okay, so we can leave this meeting And we come back on the other, the new link at 2:10.
Right. Thank you
very much,
Thanks.
everybody. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.